This audio presentation of Success is Normal by Marie S. Watts is brought to you by AudioEnlightenment.com. Copyright 2015, all rights reserved. Explanation to the reader. To those of you who are not familiar with my former publications, a few words of explanation are due. The contents of this book will not act as a mental tranquilizer. On the contrary, you may be stirred to the very depth of your being. Certain it is that you will be aroused and alerted to existence as it is. Within these pages you will find many statements that may challenge your credulity. At first glances these statements may seem illogical or unreasonable. However, a thoughtful study of this book will reveal that every fact stated herein is perfectly logical and absolutely true. Furthermore, you will discover why these statements are true, and that your comprehension of these truths will be manifested as your completely successful experience in daily living. To those of you who are familiar with the ultimate, it may just at first appear that I have departed from the absolute. Some of the terminology herein does seem to be dualistic, but please bear with me and you will find that I am merely using words and terms that seem necessary to explain a subject that is difficult to present in words. The purpose of this book is to enable the reader to discover with his own consciousness the principle of complete success. I have written this book in whatever terms were necessary to the fulfillment of this purpose. This book is dedicated to you, the reader. Success is normal. Success is normal. Failure is abnormal. There are numerous books available telling the reader how to be a success, but this is not one of them. The purpose of this book is to enable you to discover how to be successful. There is a vast difference between being successful and being a success. There is also a tremendous difference between failure and being a failure. If you wish to be successful, it is necessary to understand the difference between being successful and being a success. It is also necessary for you to understand the difference between failure and being a failure. The contents of this book will explain this difference, and your understanding of this explanation will enable you to discover how to be successful. Before we proceed, let one fact be very clear. The contents of this book are not a method or formula for success. Rather, within these pages you will discover the principle of success which is already present in and as your own consciousness. The assumptive human mind has devised many gimmicks for success, but not one of these methods has ever enabled anyone to be completely successful in every aspect of his experience. It is impossible for anyone to be completely successful until he knows what constitutes success. Success means more than an accumulation of vast sums of money. It means more than the attainment of a position of power. It means more than prestige or popularity. Success means living successfully in every area of your experience. It means being equally successful in your business, your home, your friendship, and your social life. But this is not all. It also means being successful in mind and in body. Lack of peace and joy is equally failure. Does this summary of success seem illogical to you? Well, let us examine this subject more thoroughly and see whether or not it is logical. It is a well-known fact that John D. Rockefeller was a tremendous financial success, yet he was a dismal failure where his health was concerned. It has been said that he had a standing offer of a fortune waiting for anyone who could cure his digestive trouble. Certain it is that he could not have been a completely joyous, free individual, thus he could not be considered a complete success. All of us are acquainted with those who are exceedingly successful in one aspect of their experience, but are failures in other aspects of their daily lives. For instance, one may apparently have excellent health, but be sadly deficient in wealth. He may be healthy and wealthy, but still be burdened by a sense of failure where his family is concerned. Perhaps he feels a lack of appreciation or of love, or it may be that he is socially inadequate. Or there are many areas in which failure can rear its head. No matter how successful one may be in some area, we have stated that it is necessary to know what constitutes success. We have also mentioned the necessity to know the difference between being successful and being a success. Also that we must differentiate between failure and being a failure. When we know what constitutes success, we will understand this difference. This understanding may very well mean the difference between an apparent success and an apparent failure in and as your entire life and experience. So let us proceed to discover just what it is that constitutes success. Success is something so much greater than has generally been realized. Success is an established fact. Actually, success is a universal fact. No one can doubt that this universe is a successful universe. It has always successfully conducted itself and its affairs. The latest theory about the universe is that it always existed, and that it never began and will never end. This is quite a complete success, isn't it? Indeed so. This universe is completely successful, and in order to be completely successful, it has to be successful in every area of its existence. It is. If it were not, where would we be? If this universe had not been successful, it would have been obliterated by its own accumulated failure eons ago. So let us start from the true premise, namely, success is a universal fact, equally present everywhere and eternally. Now you may be asking some questions. For instance, what is success of the universe to do with the success of my business, my home, my happiness? What is this to do with my individual success in finding the right employment, meeting the right people, etc.? Or you may wonder what universal success has to do with your successfully bodily activity. It has everything to do with every aspect of your existence. It is the basic premise from which all success must be realized. If success is not recognized to be universal existent, there can be no such thing as complete success. If there could be areas of failure in universal success, you would perhaps be successful in one area of your experience, but a total failure in other areas. A universal fact or principle is present everywhere and eternally. Furthermore, it is present without interruption. The universal principle, success, would not be complete if it were missing anywhere, and if there were one split second in which it was not present. But it is present in all its completeness, infinitely and eternally. There is no incomplete universal fact or principle. For instance, in mathematics, 1 plus 1 equals 2. This is a universal fact. It is never any more or any less than just what it eternally is. The successful answer to 1 plus 1 is never more and never less than 2. Thus, there is no incomplete answer, and there is no incomplete success. Any universal fact or principle is a specific fact. If success is equally present everywhere, it must be present where you are. If this were not true, universal success would be incomplete, and this is impossible. The universal principle of success is present in and as your entire experience. Oh, I know, it may not appear to be present, or it may appear to be present only in part. In fact, there may seem to be an overwhelming evidence that you are partially or completely a failure. How often I hear someone say, "It just seems that everything I think I have grasped turns to dust in my hands." Right here is the secret of any apparent failure. Before you have finished reading this book, you will realize why the foregoing attitude accounts for every appearance of being a failure. For the present, let us continue with our exploration of the principle called success. It is normal to be successful. This is true because success is a universal principle or fact. It is abnormal to be a failure because failure is not a universal fact. That which is not a universal fact cannot be a specific fact. That which is not a universal principle cannot be a specific principle. This means that the universal principle success is present and in full and free operation in and as your affairs right now. You couldn't very well conduct your affairs if you were bodiless, so this universal principle success must be present in and as your bodily affairs also. The body cannot be left out of your consideration of the subject. A successful body is absolutely necessary if you are going to consciously experience being completely successful. In fact, it will be most helpful for us to consider the successful body as a criterion for the fact that success is normal. In this way, you will also perceive how it is and why it is that failure is abnormal. The body is a beautiful example of the universal principle of success. A normal body is one in which every activity, every function is a success. It is as natural for the activity of every body to be successful as it is for the bodies of the stars and the planets to function successfully, or the body of the Earth planet to successfully perform its activities. But this is not all. The successful activity of the body is the very same principle in action which functions as the successful activity of the planetary systems of our Earth planet and of the body of you or of me. We have stated that it is normal to be successful and that failure is not normal. Let us now perceive why it is normal to be successful. Success is an integral aspect of your consciousness. In a manner of speaking, it could be said to be built into your existence. Do you doubt this? Well, suppose you decide to walk across a room, to raise your arm, or to blink your eye. Doesn't it seem perfectly normal for you to be able to do these things? Does it occur to you that you might fail in the attempt to walk, to talk, or to function in any way other than as normal? Indeed, no. If you were not able to perform any normal activity, you would have to say that this situation was abnormal. On the contrary, to be able to act normally means that success is normal. Right here is an example of the fact that it is normal to be successful, and that it is not normal to fail. Here is also an example of the fact that success is like a built-in aspect of your existence. Noteworthy is the fact that before you even decide to take a step, raise an arm, or blink an eye, you know that you can succeed in this activity. You do not even stop to consider whether or not you might succeed or fail in this endeavor. Inherent within and as your consciousness is the knowledge that you can succeed in any normal bodily activity. Normally, you do not have to stop and think in order to be able to walk or talk or to perform any other function. You are simply conscious of the fact that you are capable of this activity, and you simply act upon this awareness. Consciousness does not think. Consciousness is aware or conscious. Now you may very well be saying something like the following: yes, I know, but normal bodily activity has nothing to do with my business, my home, or my social activity. Let us consider this assertion for a moment. Before you take one single step, you have to decide to take that step. A decision takes place within, and as your consciousness, before you raise your arm, blink your eyes, or take a step. This decision is mental. It is an activity of your intelligence or your mind in action. But it is well to note that the very same mind that decides to act now, that it can succeed in acting. Therefore, the knowledge that success is normal is built in, or inherent within, and as your consciousness. If you are not intelligent enough to raise your arm, the arm could not raise by itself. If you are unconscious, you could not take a step. Intelligence must be active in order that any activity take place. Intelligence must be active if any decision to act takes place. The intelligence which decides to act and acts is identically the same mind that knows that it can succeed in its activity. Now let us consider this very same mind when it comes to your business activity. Could you conduct a business if your mind were not active? Indeed, you could not. And you are aware of the fact that your mental activity is requisite to the success of your business. For the purpose of clarification, it would be well for you to ask some rather pertinent questions of yourself. For instance, do I have two minds, one that conducts itself as my bodily activity, and another which conducts my business? If so, where is the dividing line between the intelligence that acts as my bodily activity and the intelligence that acts as my business activity? Where does one leave off and the other begin? The answer to these questions must of necessity be that you really have but one mind, and it is the activity of this one mind which conducts both your bodily affairs and your business affairs. You cannot possibly say that your intelligence ends at the outline of your body. Within the next moment, your mind may be focused in some city thousands of miles distant from where you are now located. Would this be possible if your mind were confined to your body? If it were possible for your mind to be confined to your body, you would not even know what was going on around you. All you would know would be what is going on in or as the bodily activity. Of course, it is ridiculous to even consider such an impossible situation, yet the foregoing example does bring out an important point, vis-a-vis the intelligence which is successful as the activity of your body is the very same intelligence which conducts your business. If this intelligence knows inherently that it can succeed in its bodily activity, it also knows that it can be successful in its activity as your business affairs. Herein is a statement of the entire principle of success. Now let us perceive why it sometimes seems that you fail in your business activity. The decision to act and any specific activity of the body takes place almost simultaneously. There is no period of wondering what to do between the decision and the act. There is no long period of reasoning, of planning, or of weighing the pros and cons of whatever or not to take a step. You simply decide to take that step and you immediately take it. You know that you can succeed in taking the step, and you never doubt your ability to successfully carry out your decision. When it comes to a business activity, you may be inclined to doubt the outcome of your decision. You may go through a period of delay, wondering if you are right, weighing the consequence, trying to humanly ascertain how to go about taking some business step. All sorts of obstacles may present themselves as to why you might fail to succeed, and you might even give up the whole affair. Now we have arrived at the necessity to understand just why there seems to be doubt and indecision. We must also perceive why we seem to be subject to failure. For this purpose we must return to a very pertinent statement. Success is a universal fact, equally present everywhere and eternally. This universe is an intelligent universe, and it acts intelligently. Furthermore, it is eternally and infinitely successful in all of its activity. Intelligent activity is always successful because it is universal mind in action, and this infinite intelligence is incapable of making mistakes. Neither can it fail or know anything of failure. You may call this universal intelligence what you will, but I call it God. All that has been presented in this booklet so far has been but the presentation for the absolute truth, which is to follow. From this point you will find no more statements that sound dualistic. The basic and only premise of this approach is the fact that God is all. All is God. So let us proceed from this premise. God being all is the only mind or intelligence. An unconscious mind is an impossibility, so the only mind in existence is conscious mind. But conscious mind cannot be separated from life, because life is essential if you are conscious. So God, the universe, is conscious living mind or intelligence. You are conscious, you are alive, and you are intelligent. Thus the universal, conscious living intelligence, which is always successful, is your very existence. We have said that your intelligence is not confined to your body. We have perceived that it is not circumscribed within any little area where your attention seems to be centered. Now it would be well for you to ask, just where does my intelligence end? Where is a line of demarcation which separates my conscious mind from the universal conscious mind? If you gaze into the heavens, you will not be able to define a point at which your consciousness ends. Indeed, there is no circumference surrounding your conscious intelligence. There is no line of demarcation that separates your conscious mind, which is God. Who or what is it that seems to encircle your boundless, conscious, living intelligence? What is it that appears to bind you to earth? What is it that presents a false picture or limited intelligence, limited life, and limited success? The spacemen are discovering that hitherto apparent boundaries do not actually exist. You may this instant make this same discovery. The universal freedom they are discovering by experiment you may discover through self-revelation. But this is not all. Your discovery will be boundless, unlimited by the fallacies called time and space. Yours will be no partial discovery, rather it will be complete in every aspect. There is nothing in existence that can bind you, limit you, or in any way interfere with your intelligence. Also, there is nothing that can in any way interfere with the successful activity of the conscious intelligence you are. That which would seem to limit and bind you is the assumptive mind of man with breath in his nostrils. But this is only an illusion. It is not your illusion. In fact, it is not really anyone's illusion. Don't claim it, don't honor it, don't let your infinite conscious intelligence even seem to be bound by it. You cannot be misled by something that you know does not exist. It is not enough to say that it has no power. It is requisite to know that it has no existence, and to know why it has no existence. It cannot exist because God, your conscious intelligence, is the only conscious mind in existence. It is the assumptive, illusory mind of man that seems to be a failure. It cannot act successfully and intelligently because it is not intelligence. Thus even its apparent temporary success can be only an appearance of partial success. Being limited by its very illusory nature, it must of necessity be limited in its illusion of success. It is the assumptive, illusory mind of man that would claim to be self-important. It tries to make weighty decisions. It plans, it attempts to carry out its plans. It weighs the pros and cons of a decision. It fluctuates and it delays. It is timid and afraid. It is subject to all kinds of fallacies. Because of itself, it is completely false. It is the same fallacious mind that wants to be a success, but inevitably it must be this very same mind that is a failure. It has to be a failure, you see, because it is not intelligent. It is not intelligence. But don't you be deceived. This is not your conscious mind. If it were, you would not be reading these words. In fact, you would not have been interested in this booklet at all. Oh, I know it has seemed that you had a mind of your own, separate and apart from the one universal intelligence. But now you know that your conscious mind is limitless. This very knowledge should mean your freedom from all pseudo-limitations of a limited, so-called human mind. This illusory mind is incapable of receiving the boundless intelligence which is your conscious mind. Being illusory by its very nature, it can only remain within the bonds of its own illusions. So you'll not make the mistake of trying to realize your universal intelligence with an illusory human mind. Universal intelligence is the only mind. There is no other mind that can be intelligence. And universal intelligence is your only intelligence, because there is no other mind for you to have or to be. Have you ever noticed that the objectives you plan never quite succeed as you hoped? Haven't you noticed that a spontaneous decision and your immediate fulfillment of this decision always culminates in the greatest enjoyment and satisfaction? This is normal. It is normal to know when to act, where to act, how to act, and to act. All of this is normal because it is universal intelligence in action. It is this very same spontaneous activity which means complete success in every aspect of your daily living. However, this successful spontaneous activity will not seem to be possible in your experience if you insist in your attempt to be someone or something important of yourself and separate from the one all-impersonal universal mind. By refusing to claim to be a self-important human being, you do not sacrifice your identity. Actually, you never were this assumptive human mind that you seem to be. Never were you a human identity. There is no identity other than God identified. To disclaim a spurious human identity means that you have claimed your infinite or God identity. This is the identity that is always completely successful. But this God identity does not reason, think, plan, struggle, or labor to be a success. It is successful, and it knows itself to be what it is. Its activity is as unpremeditated as is your activity when you blink an eye or raise your arm. It is completely spontaneous, and it knows nothing of delay. In other words, the consciousness that is aware of how to act or when to act is the consciousness that acts. And there is no so-called time interim between the awareness of how or when to act and the conscious activity itself. It is as natural as walking, talking, or any other normal activity. It is also just as natural to be successful in your business activity as it is natural for you to be successful in walking, talking, or raising your arm. Now you may be wondering whether or not it is possible for you to conduct your business without human thinking, reasoning, planning, etc. Please be assured that it is possible, but it is necessary for you to know who and what you are, and to know why the successful activity takes place without any so-called human reasoning or planning. This knowledge cannot be taught to you, but your awareness of these facts is evidenced as the little assumptive human mind is obliterated. The obliteration of the little assumed personal I is a prerequisite to all self-discovery. Let us then perceive some of the ways in which this assumptive I may be dispelled. I cannot give a method or formula that will enable you to obliterate the illusory little I, but I can tell you of certain procedures which have been helpful to many students of the ultimate. It will not be helpful, though, if you make the mistake of attempting to use these procedures as a formula. You see, the revelations of your boundless self must take place within and as your own consciousness. But this self-revelation does take place naturally as the fallacious little I is dispelled. Perhaps one of the most helpful activities in dispelling the spurious personal I is to frequently remind yourself of who and what you are. Also to remind yourself of who and what you are not. By this procedure, I do not mean that you are to indulge in affirmations or denials. This approach is not a process of thought-taking. No amount of mental gymnastics will obliterate the fictitious little I. But it is possible for you to frequently focus your attention upon who and what you are, without thought-taking or mental gymnastics. This does not mean that you are mentally inactive. Quite the contrary, your consciousness is intensely active. But this activity is not one of taking thought or concentrating or of following some mental formula. Let us perceive some ways in assuring that your genuine self will reveal itself without resorting to any human mental activity. It is well to begin each day with contemplation. It is helpful to begin your contemplation with the realization that as an assumptive human being, you can know nothing, have nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. You will use any words that appear in and as your consciousness. Never will you use any words as a formula. Rarely will the words be exactly the same in context. I find it helpful to sit quietly a few moments and consider the boundless, unlabored activity of the universe. Then I may consider the effortless activity of the flowers in bloom, or the silent, unlabored activity of the tree as it bears its blossoms and its fruits. Then I may find myself saying something like this: Isn't it glorious to know that infinite, conscious, living intelligence conducts its activity with such impersonal peace and effortless power? I am so happy to know that my activity is the same infinite all, acting as its own presence and power. Now I find that the little fallacious I is less in evidence. Thus I can say, of myself I can do nothing. Of myself I can have nothing. Of myself I can know nothing. Of myself I can be nothing. Isn't it glorious that of myself I am nothing? A few moments of this silent contemplation will mean complete release from any false sense of personal responsibility or personal existence. In other words, the I that seems to want to be a success is obliterated. Once the assumptive little I is dispelled, my God identity joyously exclaims, I am that I am. Because I am the very presence of the universal power and the power of the universal presence, I act as the I that I am. I am conscious mind, forever aware of being intelligently active. I am intelligent consciousness, constantly aware that I am all knowledge, all that is known, and the only mind that knows. I am omni-action. I am omni-active principle and ceaseless, uninterrupted, unlabored action. Being all, I know only that I am being is omni-action. I know only the conscious intelligence I am in action. Being boundless, fetterless omni-action, I know only the now and the here of the omni-active mind that I am. Needless to say, no assumptive little personal I could make such statements. But these statements can be made when the fallacious little I is dispelled. You see, only the mind that is God can know the things of God. It takes the intelligence which is God to know the truth of the foregoing statements. Thus it would be futile to claim these truth if a personal I were trying to assume to be something of itself. But right contemplation obliterates this fallacious personal sense, and then it is the mind that is God knowing what it is, and signifying what it knows itself to be. It is the spurious little personal I that wants to do something of itself and to be something of itself. It is the same illusory I that wants to be a success. It deludes itself into thinking it can be either a success or a failure. It plans and then doubts its ability to succeed in the culmination of these plans. It imagines that it must meet the right people or think the right thoughts. It imagines that there are other minds that can interfere with or obstruct its success. It deludes itself into the illusion there must be an interim of time between knowing what to do and the actual activity itself. It imagines there must be a time element between the awareness of the activity and the complete success of the activity. It seems to interfere with the effortless success of the genuine and only I. It is somewhat like the interference which jams a radio program if a nation with a powerful station wishes it to be jammed. But all of this is illusion. The little I must inevitably delude itself, for it is, by its very nature, an illusion. But this assumptive impostor cannot interfere with you. It cannot delude you. Once it is perceived to be non-existent, you can live and move and have your entire being completely free from all its pretension of being a presence or power. You are the I that I am. Thus you are not deluded. Your days may be so busy that you seem to forget for a short time that you are the I that I am. You may even find that you are trying to think something, know something, plan something, or do something of yourself. You may even be tempted to imagine that you are something of yourself separate and apart from God. However, no matter how busy you are, it is impossible for you to retreat from those about you for short periods during the most busy day. It is well to have some period of seclusion during each day in order to remind yourself of what you are and what you are not. Of course, you do reach the point where you walk in and as the infinite impersonal I am identity constantly. In this glorious experience, you need no reminders. You constantly know what you are, and this means that you know what everyone is. However, until this uninterrupted, conscious living mind is an ever-present experience, it is helpful to retire to some quiet place and frequently remind yourself of the glorious truth you already know. We have said that success is an omnipresent aspect of the universe. We have also stated that it is a universal principle, equally present everywhere and eternally. That is why success must be complete. Any seemingly partial success would make it appear the universal success could be absent in some instance, could fluctuate, or could come and go. This is impossible because God, the universe, is always present and equally present. Thus success is present in all ways. It also means that success is not interrupted by interim of failure. The universal principle, success, is omnipresent in and as every business success, but it is not confined to just your business. The very same principle which is active as your successful business is present and operative in and as your home, your social affair, and as your bodily activity. If you attempt to circumscribe success within the bounds of your business, you are going to limit your success in all fields of activity. In fact, any such practice would ultimately limit the success of your business, so it is well to consider the infinite principle success in its entirety. In this way, your entire life and experience will be equally successful. Of course, it is requisite to realize that your business is successful, but never imagine that your successful business is separated in the least from your social activities or your bodily activities. If it seems that you are not being successful in your business or your profession or your employment, it is necessary to be specific in your realization that you are the universal principle, success, in action, as your business, your profession, and your employment. But you do not attempt to block off your business or professional success from the entirety of your successful existence. The universal principle is inseparable. It cannot be divided into blocks or areas of success. It simply will not be apparent completely unless you are aware that this principle is complete, omnipresent, and equally present and active everywhere and eternally. In like manner, if you seem to be unsuccessful in your home, it is necessary to specifically recognize the fact that success is omnipresent. Thus it has to be present and evident in and as your home. But of course you will not attempt to limit this principle to your home. What we are pointing up here is the fact that the indivisible nature of the principle success must be realized if you are to be conscious of being completely successful. But this does not mean that you should not be alert and recognize success to be present in any specific activity that might temporarily seem to be unsuccessful. The infinite principle remains the same successful activity, whether it is evident as universal activity, the activity of adding a column of figures or baking a cake. And because you know that you are the I that I am, you also know that you are this universal principle in action. You are not concerned with being a success. You know that you are successful, because you are the very principle called success. Thus you do not labor, struggle, plan, or strain to accomplish that which you already are. You exist because your existence is essential to the completeness which is God the universe. You are successful because your success is necessary to the successful maintenance and sustenance of the universe. You are completely successful because your complete success is requisite to the completely successful universe. You do not claim to be success, neither do you fear that you will be a failure. You are conscious of being successful in and as every aspect of your existence. You are aware of being completely successful in and as the eternity of your existence. You know that there can be no lapse from or interruption of your completely successful existence. To acknowledge all of these truths is to honor your God identity. Never were you any more or any less successful than you are at this moment. Never will you be any more or any less conscious of what you generally are than you are at this moment. Inevitably, questions will arise. For instance, will it prove itself in and as my daily affairs? Will I see the evidence of this truth in my business, my home, and my body? If these were just beautiful theories, they would never have been written. We have innumerable letters attesting to the fact that this truth does prove itself to be true. The proof of its genuineness and power is evidenced in innumerable ways. That which has been proven in and as the experience of so many students is also capable of proof in your experience. However, the only test of any truth is whether or not it proves to be true in your own affairs. And you are the only one who can really discover whether or not the truth presented in these pages will prove to be true in your experience. If it does prove to be your truth, and it will, you will discover that your entire life, being, body, and experience are gloriously successful. To be successful means to be successful. This means that you are completely fulfilled in every aspect of your existence. The truths revealed herein are not just beautiful theories that may or may not be evidenced in and as your existence. Rather, they are the immutable, eternal principle of your life, being, and body. Success already exists in and as your consciousness. Your response to these truths signifies the fact that you are aware of being every truth that is presented in these pages. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Isaiah 16:3. This is a statement of absolute truth. To keep your consciousness stayed on the Almas, the entirety that is God, does mean peace, joy, abundance, and perfection. The entirety which is God is your very existence. It is the very presence of the universal principle success. Your consciousness is the presence of this principle, and the presence of this glorious principle is your consciousness. Thus it has ever been, and thus it will ever be. And that is necessary for your completely successful experience is that you recognize this truth, that you accept it, and that you perceive it to be true. It is normal to be completely successful, and failure is impossible in the light of this truth. Right here and right now, you know that you are not a little isolated human being separated from the universal principle success. The assumptive little I with its illusions of separateness is obliterated. You are not struggling to be or to become a success. Rather, you are aware of the fact that you are successful. You are inseparable from complete success, for the universal principle success is present in and as your entire life, consciousness, mind, being, and body. Thus you are completely successful. You know that the complete success you are is undeviating, constant, ever-present, and ever-operative. Now you know that success is normal. You also know why it is natural to be successful. This is the way. Walk in freedom and enjoy, fully aware of being the complete success that you have always been and will always be. End of booklet. This audio presentation of Success is Normal by Marie S. Watts has been brought to you by AudioEnlightenment.com. Copyright 2015, all rights reserved.